It's a Tuesday in the association, and we've got you covered with the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast presented by DraftKings Pick 6. Brandon Kravitz here, along with my main man, Nick Whalen. Coming up on today's podcast, we're going to hand things off to you for the bounce, get those questions ready to go, and we will wrap today's episode with a flurry of them. Nick, we had 5 games in the NBA last night. We've got cup play that starts tonight, but a lot of different directions that we can go here. I figure we should start with the action from last night before the excitement of cup play just takes over this show.
Yeah.
Which I say with only mild sarcasm because I think I am slightly more excited about this than you are. Just a little bit.
You know, we're going into year 2 now of the cup, and I think year 1 was a success. I think it actually... Yes, especially once we got to tournament play, I think it was more captivating than I expected. My one complaint with all this is that the NBA still needs to do a better job of simplifying and publicizing, the format here. It's like this really snuck up on just about everybody. I think it's like, oh yeah, the NBA Cup starts tonight, and you're like, wait, what starts tonight? It's like, okay, group play, Tuesdays and Fridays for the next 3 weeks. All these games count toward group play. So there's 5 teams per group. And each team plays 4 games. Everybody plays each other once. There are too many ties. That is another complaint here, is that it's like almost every group is going to go to some sort of tiebreaker, you would think, unless somebody runs the table. You're going to have a lot of 2-2 teams, a lot of 3-1 teams. Who gets the wild card? How is that determined? Like, there's just too much going on, I think, to keep track of in what's already, a very busy, packed regular season where teams are playing 4 games a week. I like the idea. I like that the NBA tried something new. I like that they go off-site and do the semifinals or the finals in Vegas. I think that's very cool. They kind of leaned into it with that Ocean's 11 style commercial this year, which I love. You don't see that many cool creative sports commercials anymore. I feel like they always used to be cool when we were a kid. Maybe that's just some nostalgia factor, but I love that.
Probably part of just being a kid.
I will say what's interesting though is, like, do you think the players have fully bought in? Like Jimmy Butler, for instance, is out tonight for the Miami Heat in game 1 of their qualifier. And it's like, he's seemingly injured, but it's like, if you really cared about the NBA Cup, would he play in this game? Damian Lillard's in concussion protocol tonight for the Milwaukee Bucks. Again, not something he could control, but do you think players, is there enough of a carrot as far as the winning team getting $500K per player? Do you think the players care about this? Because I think that's the number one thing. If the players really care, the fans will follow suit.
Well, I think we go back to what you said about last year. Why was it a success last year? Because the players cared. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
If the players treated it like it didn't matter, it wouldn't matter to anybody else. They played a little bit harder. At least that's what it seemed. The competition level seemed like it ratcheted up a little bit. I don't think it's going to keep teams from load managing if they feel like that's what they need to do, or players that feel like they need to miss a game. I don't think it's enough of a motivating factor where I'm going to go out there with a sprained ankle or get through concussion protocol quicker than I need to in order to play in these. But last year we saw the Celtics get eliminated, a team that I thought would definitely not care about this, and they were visibly frustrated with the way that it ended. But this tournament, the reason why I like it is that it is set up for teams that are just good enough to, when they want to be competitive, can win games. But it's set up for them to care about something and at the beginning of the season that they feel like they can win. And then last year, Indiana, which was the perfect example of what I'm talking about, a good basketball team that we didn't have high expectations for, but was good enough to win games in a competitive environment. They went on to not win it, but they were in the final. And then they took that experience with them into the playoffs. And I would like to think that helped playing in a tournament type elimination atmosphere. So in that regard, absolute success. And I don't think this is for the casuals, because casuals just simply haven't checked in yet on the NBA. This is for nerds like us. Yeah. Maybe the court helps for casuals that are flipping around and go, what the hell is this? But outside of that, this is for hardcore NBA fans to just give them something else to be entertained by so that they stay locked in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the casuals probably don't really check in until after
Christmas.
The NFL playoffs. Yeah, after Christmas even. And I think you're right as far as the, this kind of being a litmus test for some of those teams. Right? Like Boston, they don't need this in their back pocket. They don't need to say like, man, well, if we can't win the NBA Cup, how are we going to win the finals? I think teams that have accomplished things that are greater than the NBA Cup, i.e., making the finals or winning the finals, a little bit harder to get up for this. But like you said, I think a team like Indiana, a team like the Cavs this year, it's like a team that kind of wants
are perfect.
to, right. You want to test yourself, and you want to, the only thing you could do in the regular season, really realistically, to prove that you're a legitimate contender is win the NBA Cup, for better or for worse, right? Otherwise it's just this long, drawn out 82 game season where you're like, all right, we won 60 games, but nobody's going to take us seriously unless we make a playoff run. This is kind of the one opportunity that you get during the regular season. And everybody can debate how legitimate it is, how much we actually care about it, but it's the one thing we're given during the regular season where a team can say, all right, we're making a statement here. And, the Lakers kind of did that last year, right? You had to take them a little bit more seriously because they won this. They
raised a banner. Let's not forget the LA Lakers that have endless banners raised a banner for this. That helps the legitimacy of it too.
It does. Well, and it was something that you kept in the back of your mind. Even as the Lakers are basically, playing 500 basketball for most of the year. I know they were, after the All-Star break, they went on a little bit of a run, but it was always like, well, we saw them turn it on in the NBA Cup. Maybe they could do this in the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. And for that, it is at least mildly entertaining. I don't want to overrate it, but I think anytime in November you can give me 2% more juice in a game, I'll just take it.
Yeah.
Sometimes the courts get a little annoying. Like to me, it's the all red. Those are the only ones that I have a hard time watching games with an all red court.
I kind of like the courts, gonna be honest.
Just the red one. I like the rest of them, but the red is just a little much. It's like the blue field in Boise. It's too much for me.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's definitely a lot. It harkens back though to a better time, I think, for NBA creativity, which was the late '90s, early 2000s.
Those
formative
jerseys.
Time for me. You think back to some of the courts that we saw back then, specifically the Charlotte Hornets court that had that gradient teal with the giant Hornet logo on it, the honeycomb insignia in the lane. You just don't see that anymore. And this is the closest thing we can get to that.
I do appreciate the creativity. I'm a little upset with my Orlando Magic. They're just rolling out what they had last year. I wanted some innovation. I want something new. Let's switch it up every year. Let's talk about some of these games from last night. And then I want to talk about good finds on bad teams. We got some interesting names to tee up for you. The Bulls pushed the Cavs last night. That team is still unbeaten in Cleveland, and they have the most games without losing since the 2015 Golden State Warriors. This is next level stuff. Yeah. And I guess you could circle Boston on the 19th. They play them in 7 days as their first loss. It's got to happen at some point, and maybe it'll be one of those sleepy spots where they're playing a team that they should be able to pounce on, and then they just kind of fall asleep at the wheel, or it'll take a Boston in order to do it. But have you circled the game on the calendar for when we're going to see the demise of this unbeaten streak?
So first of all, you mentioned that Warriors team in 2015-16. That's the team that ended up blowing the 3-1 lead in the finals. They started the year 23-0. 23-0. I kind of forgot about that. Obviously, that was a team that won 73 games, but I forgot they had gotten off to that crazy of a start. This has been really impressive by Cleveland, and I think this is now well beyond, okay, yeah, this is fun. We'll see if this team is legitimate. I mean, they started off the year with a really soft schedule. They beat Toronto, Detroit, and Washington to get to 3-0, and you're like, all right, those might be 3 of the 5 worst teams in the league. But they have a win over the Knicks. They have a blowout win over the Lakers. They have a win over the Orlando Magic. They beat the Bucks twice. I don't know if that means anything, but it feels like it should mean something. They've beaten the Warriors and even the Chicago team that's been pretty frisky. It's not going to go down as a great win, but Bulls played pretty well.
That was a fun game last night.
It was. I was watching that. Yeah, I mean, Cavs did not shoot the ball well whatsoever. They ended up 15 of 45 from beyond the arc. Darius Garland, Sam Merrill, Georges Niang were 2 of 15 combined. So if they just have a little bit better shooting luck, this is a game that the Cavs probably win relatively comfortably. And Chicago had its chances to win this game. I mean, Pat Williams had some brutal plays down the stretch. He missed like what would have been, I think it was a game tying 3, or it would have made it a 1-possession game.
It would have been a 1-point game had it gone in. I was on the Bulls plus 7.5 last night, so I was counting every bucket, and it almost, as close as it was, almost lost that bet. Still came out ahead, but that Patrick Williams 3 on the wing, he was wide open.
could not have been more open and just not even close. He also had another play where he drove into the lane, into traffic, and turned it over. The Bulls had a very good chance to at least make this a one possession game, or they would have had a chance to win at the end. They also refused to give the ball to Zach LaVine over and over. It was just like terrible shots, turnovers by Chicago. LaVine is like calling for the ball wide open. They wouldn't give it to him. I thought that was a little strange. But either way, to answer your question, Cavs are 12-0 now. You look at that game next week, which is an in-season tournament game, by the way, in Boston. I think that'll be the one. I mean, especially if they are still undefeated for that one. Like, again, in Boston, Celtics fans are going to be nuts. I mean, this is about as good of a regular season stage as you get. It's the NBA Cup. It's a potential 15-0 team coming into your building to try to knock them off. But we'll see. I mean, they do play Philadelphia tomorrow night on Wednesday. My guess, though, is Joel Embiid will not be out there. And obviously, Tyrese Maxey won't be out there either, because Embiid's going to debut tonight. No chance he plays on the second night of a back-to-back. So that might end up being a free win.
Yeah, and then, Chicago played them tough, so that could be one. Charlotte's been playing some tough basketball. I can see them tripping up against, not Philadelphia. I don't think that's going to happen, but Chicago or Charlotte, those are the perfect kind of teams to potentially take them out. I kind of thought Chicago was going to do it last night. Maybe they found a little bit of a recipe, but we'll have to wait and see on that. It was a big night for a couple of big men in the NBA. Alperen Sengun, 27 points, 17 rebounds, 3 blocks. Wemby, 34, 14, 6 assists, and 3 blocks on top of it. So good to see these big men hitting their stride.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a kind of a weird start for Sengun, where he had this huge game on opening night, and then his minutes have been up and down. But there are certain matchups, and the Wizards are one of them, where they don't have anybody to stop him. And this was just a complete domination by Sengun. Just 31 minutes last night, 15-point win for the Houston Rockets. No Fred VanVleet, by the way, last night for Houston. So we saw Amen Thompson move into the starting lineup. 28 minutes for him, 13 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist, 4 steals, and 4 blocks for Amen Thompson.
That's awesome. I mean, that's exactly what you're looking for, and maybe his brother can start playing here soon as well. OKC had their first outing without Chet Holmgren in the lineup, 6-point win over the Clippers. SGA with a career 45, career high for him. Is this what a Chetless OKC team is going to look like? Should we be placing our SGA MVP futures bets now? And in terms of a direct replacement, it just felt like they kind of rolled in their depth. Like, I don't think there's a true replacement for Chet on this team. Well, what did you see as far as the Chetless Thunder go?
Yeah, we got a pretty decent sample here, I think, against a good Clippers team that has a traditional type of center in Ivica Zubac. So that's something Alex and I were talking about on the show yesterday. Is can we just get some sort of representation of what this OKC rotation will look like going forward? And I think we got that, because this was a competitive enough game that I think if you look at the minutes totals, there's going to be pretty accurate going forward. Yeah, you mentioned the 45 for SGA, also 9 assists, 3 rebounds, 5 steals, and 2 blocks. Ooh. I mean, just a ridiculous fantasy performance from him. Yeah. Kind of wild that he's never, 45 is his career high. I mean, I guess it fits the narrative that he somehow scores between 28 and 34 points every single night. But every night seems like he should have had a 52-point game at some point, but he is not. But yeah, we're going to see more SGA. We're going to see more Jalen Williams. Those guys played 39 and 35 minutes respectively. They truly do not have another big man on this roster. If you want to count Kenrich Williams or Ousmane Dieng, that's great. Those guys played a combined 15 minutes. They really went with a smaller lineup. Isaiah Joe was out there with Lou Dort and Aaron Wiggins. All those guys played big minutes. So I think they're going to try to go small as much as they can. And, you're going up against a team that has a legit big man in Ivica Zubac, and he played well. I mean, he had 22 and 14 in this game with 3 blocks, 9 of 12 from the field. So that is a bit of a concern. OKC was number 1 in the NBA in terms of opponent field goal percentage at the rim with Chet Holmgren in the lineup. I don't know if they bring somebody in the short term. My guess, if you're OKC, is you try to survive these next 2 or 3 weeks till you get Hartenstein back, and then you can run, more of a traditional rotation with him as your full-time 5.
Right, because we're going to be without Chet for at least 8 weeks. So there's a lot to figure out still. What's the timeline on Hartenstein? Because that does feel like the next logical move is, let's see what it looks like with him out there, get back to keeping the same second unit minutes intact, but and then figuring it out from there. Maybe you still make a move at the deadline. What's the latest on Isaiah?
Based on our last update, which was almost a month ago at this point, they said on October 17th that he would be reevaluated in 5 to 6 weeks. So assuming all is going well with that recovery from a hand injury, he could be back early December.
Yeah, still eating up precious real estate on my fantasy bench. Too many injured players for me.
He's going to be a monster when he comes back, though. He's worth holding.
Yeah, definitely going to hang on to him. Embiid making his debut tonight. What are the expectations for Embiid? Are we expecting a minutes limit? This guy hasn't played basketball since last May.
Yeah, that's kind of the $1 million question. I don't know what to expect, man. You look at the prop market. His points prop tonight is at 25.5. Sixers are taking on the Knicks at home. We've seen some pretty significant line movement here. I was talking about this one last night with my guy Dan Watkins on the radio, and at that point, the Sixers were 1 point home favorites. They are now 3-point home dogs to the New York Knicks, and I think that's with the understanding that Joel Embiid maybe might be a little bit rusty. Like you said, has not played basketball in a while. Was seemingly injured 2 weeks ago, and then suddenly was back to being active when he needed to serve a suspension. So I think there's a pretty good chance that Embiid does not come out and just give you 35 and 15 like he is at his peak. I think there's going to be a ramp up period. I think there are legitimate concerns with that knee, and I think the Sixers probably don't want to overexert him too much. So if you're looking for a play on that game, I would probably stay away from the Embiid prop market just because, even if he does play, 27, 28 minutes, he could still put up numbers. But I like the Knicks to win this game. I mean, no Maxey and a potentially limited Embiid, first night of a back-to-back for the Sixers. I think this should be a good spot for the Knicks.
You just hit on one of my prop picks on our RotoWire social channels. I am leading into the Joel Embiid props, and I am on Fade City tonight for Embiid. His PRA is 39.5. This guy hasn't played in 6 months. We have no idea what his minutes limit will be, if there will be one, if he's going to be good in that first game back. I like to fade Rust. He's got a lot of it. No, thank you. And he didn't look good in the summer either. So I'm happy to get away from that. The number obviously is going to rise with time, but I would think this one's not going to go well. If this doesn't pay out, though, it's because the Knicks defense has not been that good. Karl Anthony Towns is still giving up way too many points for his assignments. That could be an issue that old Tom Thibodeau is going to have to figure out, but I'm liking that play for tonight. We've got good names on bad teams to get to, but first a message for my guy Nick.
Here at RotoWire, we're proud to be partnered up with DraftKings Pick 6 this NBA season. Think your team will score more than 100 points tonight? How about your favorite point guard making more than 4 3-pointers? Check out DraftKings Pick 6, the newest way to play fantasy basketball and win cash with DraftKings. Here's how it works. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. So for hoops, we're talking points, assists, rebounds, etc. Lock in those picks, compete against opponents for your shot at huge cash prizes. Go download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use our code ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. That's code ROTOPICK for new Pick 6 customers. Play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
We're going to be looking at some gems on bad teams, the teams that you don't really like watching, or maybe some of you sickos do, and we appreciate that about you. We'll tee up some of those names in a second. Nick, before we started recording, you had mentioned that you had a couple of plays in the NBA Cup. I'm curious to know what exactly those would be. The odds-on favorite to win the NBA Cup, as I actually just lost it, but I'm pretty sure it's the Boston Celtics. Yeah, that makes sense. Are you looking for the overall winner? Do you think it's smarter to attack group play, the MVP? Yeah. How are you looking at attacking the in-season tournament?
I would look at the group play first. You could kind of adjust the winners markets as we get into it, but to me, there's not quite enough value there. I would look at group play and kind of go group by group, right? I think Group A in the East is interesting because it should have been more competitive than it currently is. You have the Knicks, the Sixers, the Magic, the Hornets, and the Nets in that group, and I think both Charlotte and Brooklyn are actually a little more live than we thought they would be coming into this, but Orlando at 5-1 to win the group. I just don't see it without Paolo Banchero. Just tough timing on that injury. He's going to miss the entire NBA Cup. I don't know if I would bet Philly either. I mean, you got at least 2 weeks without Tyrese Maxey, so he might miss most, if not all, of Poole play. Who knows how many of those games Joel Embiid is going to play? I actually think the Knicks, plus 105 is not crazy value, but I think they would really have to blow this to not win this group. And, if they lose to Philly tonight, maybe that does it. But I think if they can win this game on the road in Philly and Joel Embiid's debut, should be somewhat of a cakewalk for the Knicks to take that group. In East Group B, I would not bet the Milwaukee Bucks at plus 170. I don't really understand why they're favored, why they're still garnering this level of respect. Like, this is not just some fluky, some things have gone wrong type of start. Like, this team looks bad. If you watch the Bucks, they look like the team that is 2-8 right now.
Yeah.
They're struggling just to hang in with some of the worst teams in the NBA. And then, of course, they've played 4 really close games against the Cavs and the Celtics. So I guess maybe there is still some lingering belief there. They're not going to have Damian Lillard tonight in their first NBA Cup pool play game against Toronto. It's a losable game. Every game at this point is a losable game for the Milwaukee Bucks. I would take Indiana plus 210, maybe even Miami at plus 250, although they have, an injury to Jimmy Butler as well. I think the Pacers plus 210 to win Group B is probably the best call as far as the Eastern Conference goes. You can also get Cleveland at plus 175 to win Group C. That'll probably just come down to that Boston game next Tuesday.
And if that's the case, do you think it's just smarter to just play the Cavs on Tuesday? If you think they're going to win the group, you might as well just bet them straight up. They're going to be underdogs against Boston, right. And then if they win that game, they'll be heavy favorites. So I guess you could attack that in one of 2 ways. If they beat Boston, that number is going to change significantly. But then you could also get away from any other result within the tournament. So there's 2 different ways to look at that. What about the Pistons? I love the way the Pistons are playing basketball right now. 9-1, I'm seeing, to win the group with the Bucks, and that one feels like it's completely up in the air. Yeah. Are we writing that off completely? I would say, as far as long shots, Hornets and Pistons would be teams that I think could very well win their group. They're young, they're scrappy, and those kind of teams are the ones I want to back in the tournament.
Yeah, they're kind of like the 13 seed that could make a run to the Elite Eight, if you will. And I think both of those teams are flawed, obviously. And I'm seeing Detroit at 13-1, by the way, to win that group. But they're both in groups that I think have teams that are either also flawed or dealing with injuries, right? It's like Orlando is not the same team that they are with Banchero. Philly, who knows who's going to be out there every single night. It really just kind of feels like if you could find a way to beat the New York Knicks, you have very winnable games against Orlando and Philly. So you could sell me on the Charlotte Hornets, and then Detroit. It's a little bit tougher because I do think Indiana's legitimate. I think Miami, if they have Jimmy Butler back, that's going to be a tough game to win. But Detroit could beat Milwaukee. Again, I'm so out on this Bucks team right now, and we'll see if Damian Lillard misses more time with this concussion beyond Tuesday night. I'm not totally sold on the Pistons, being a markedly better team. They are 4-7 to begin the year. Feels like everybody is 4-7 in the Eastern Conference, but they are at least a more legitimate operation than they were last season. I mean, you could just tell right away. You could see it on opening night. I think they played Indiana. This was a team that was running ridiculous rotations. You go 5 in, 5 out under Monty Williams. They're still not a good team. They're still probably going to be a bottom 3 or 4 team in the Eastern Conference, but the level of competitiveness and just competence has clearly been raised night to night.
I'm on them tonight plus 1.5, by the way. So let's hope that the Pistons can continue their solid form here early in the season. Let's talk about some good finds on bad teams. I'm going to throw some names your way. You tell me if you like them, if it's worth it to either roster them, to hold them, because we know with these bad teams, the bottom can fall out at any moment. The first question might sound like a joke, but it's not. Does Giannis count, by the way, as good player, bad team?
The Bucks are a bad team. Yes, he counts.
And I assume he's a hold at this point.
He's a hold. Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
are you trying to trade Giannis because you don't like? He's still putting up numbers, but are you worried about the Bucks to the point where you just want to get out of the Milwaukee business?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I there's really nobody else on this team other than Giannis and Dame who I'm all that interested in, right? It's like Bobby Portis as like a bench guy in some leagues. Brook Lopez has just been blocks only basically this year. He's been terrible everywhere else. So in a worst case scenario where the Bucks are like 3-15 to begin the year, I think Giannis is asking out and he's going to what will by default be a better situation. Like I don't see a scenario in which Giannis is like sitting out the final 30 games of the year because he's waiting to get traded or anything like that. And the worse Milwaukee is in terms of supporting cast, the more 42-17 nights that we're going to see out of Giannis. So from a fantasy perspective, I don't think it's all that disastrous. And with the Eastern Conference struggling the way it is overall, you have two teams that are over 500 right now. The Bucks are always going to be pushing for that playoff spot. They're going to be the team this year that can convince themselves, well, if we can get in, we'll flip that switch come playoff time. Unless it gets to a point where they're just completely non-competitive, I wouldn't really worry about it.
Let's move to the Wizards. They have three guys that I think are interesting. Jordan Poole, who has been pretty good to start the season, also giving you defensive stats, second in the NBA in steals per game. Carrington's fun to watch, and I got a good close-up look at Bilal Coulibaly the other night at the Kia Center, and I'm blown away. The jump that he has taken from year one to year two, remarkable. He's so comfortable in his own skin with his game, doesn't force anything. He's solid on the defensive end. I'm kind of buying into the young Wizards. And even Alex Sarr. I mean, look at what he's doing in the block market.
Yeah, Alex Sarr has at least one block in every game. I believe he has 2+ blocks in all but one game on the year. They have kind of been the bad team that's turned out to be decent for fantasy. I mean, Coulibaly, Poole, Carrington, all those guys are top 100 players. Poole's been a top 25 guy so far on the year. And Coulibaly's just outside the top 60 right now in 8-cat value. And that's after a down game last night. And, I do worry a little bit about Coulibaly's upside going forward because he did really take off right when Kyle Kuzma went out of the lineup and missed like 5 or 6 games in a row. And, Kuzma's a high volume guy. He's going to steal rebounds. I don't think there's a whole lot of assist potential for Coulibaly once Kuzma's out there. I mean, he went from 6 assists against your Magic the other night to all of a sudden Kuzma's back in the lineup and he has 0 assists. He's just not going to be handling the ball quite as much. But either way, I mean, in terms of guys who looked extremely raw, looked like a young rookie last year and has taken a big step forward. I mean, Coulibaly is at the top of the list. And, you and I talked about it at the beginning of the year with Jordan Poole. I mean, his reputation took such a hit last year that I think everybody just unilaterally decided, oh, this guy sucks. I don't want him on my fantasy team. He's still a really good fantasy player. He might not be a winning player in real life, but we're 9 games into the year and he's given you 24, 2.3 steals. He's hitting 3.5 threes a game at 42%. He's also an incredibly efficient free throw shooter, which in category leagues helps you a ton. I mean, he's a guy who takes 3 to 5 free throws a game and shoots almost 90%.
Yeah, and I still think that you could get him on a bargain just because, but I think another fantasy manager that has him would be happy to move off. What about someone like Gradey Dick? He's averaging 19 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. So basically just a score at this point, but a pretty consistent one at that. And he was somebody that was he was so irrelevant last year. He was kind of off the radar for me. Now he's somebody that you just can't really ignore.
Yeah, I mean, he had an incredible stretch for about a week and a half when, Quickley and Barnes were out. And, obviously Barnes is still out for Toronto, but Quickley's been back these last couple of games. But Dick had a 6-game run where he put up 25, 3, 1.7 steals, 3.3 made threes per game. Basically shot 50, 40, 90 as well. So you knew there would be some regression coming there. But he's just a really good player. I mean, anybody who follows college basketball or college basketball recruiting shouldn't be shocked, that Gradey Dick is doing what he's doing. He was a big-time recruit, a couple of years ago. I think he's one of those guys that a lot of people look at and just typecast as like a Kyle Korver, but he's a much more complete player. He's much more of a Gordon Hayward type as opposed to this go sit in the corner, catch and shoot type of guy. And that was on full display, over the last couple of weeks with Quickley out. I do think, he's somebody, and you might have missed your window already, But if you can sell high on Gradey Dick, I would think about it, partially because of what you said, which is he's been a more fun real life player than fantasy just because the production is so concentrated on points and threes. He doesn't rebound a ton. He doesn't give you a ton of assists. Defensively, it's going to come and go at best. And, Quickly's back in the lineup. Barnes is coming back in a couple of weeks. All of a sudden, he's going to go from the number 1 or number 2 option for this team to like the number 4 option.
Let's wrap this portion of the pod with Garrison Matthews. He has tailed off quite a bit for the Hawks, sub double-digit points in 3 straight games, but still shoots a great percentage from deep. You're looking for free throw shooting. Pretty good at that, too. Are you still excited about Garrison Matthews?
No. His downturn coincided exactly with me picking him up in my 16-team league last week when I lost like my entire starting lineup due to injury. And I was like,
that's right. You were bemoaning starting him last week.
Yeah, I started him. I mean, he hit at least 1 3 in every game. I kind of got what I asked for, I guess. But no, I mean, he had a really nice run early in the year where, over a 5-game span, he was hitting like 4 threes per game. He's still getting run. He's still going to play 20, 25 minutes. He's just, he is the Kyle Korver type, right? I mean, he's the guy that like pretty much every field goal attempt is going to be from beyond the arc. It's just a matter of, how many times are they feeding it to him? If you're in a 16-team league, like the one I'm referencing, maybe he deserves a bench spot. Maybe you can stream him in there on a 4-game week, but I'm not that excited about it. I mean, with the amount of threes that teams are taking, you could just find somebody on just about any team, who could give you 1 to 3 3-pointers on a given night. But he is still going to play more minutes, as long as Bogdanovic is out, and he's set to miss, 2 or 3 more weeks. Hawks, by the way, will not have Trae Young tonight. We should mention Achilles tendonitis / dodging the Boston Celtics.
Achilles tendonitis that kept Christian McCaffrey out for almost the entire season. So big stuff there. I'm seeing some major line movement in the NBA, but enough from us. Let's hear from you. It's time for the bounce. Your questions answered by that man right there, Nick Whalen. Let's fly through these, and we'll start at the bottom. Should I take off Mikal Bridges, or I'm assuming drop Mikal Bridges, or trade for? We're going to swap Mikal Bridges for Norman Powell. Powell's had a hell of a year, by the way.
So I guess we'll assume this is a who would you rather roster question. And
feels like a trade.
It's got to be Norman Powell, man. I'm glad we're talking about him. I was looking for an excuse to bring him up. I mean, Mikal Bridges is giving you 15, only 3.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.7 blocks. Percentages have been fine. He's actually been terrible at the free throw line so far, which is interesting. But I just don't love what I'm seeing from Mikal Bridges as far as what the upside is here. Like, he has 1 20-point game on the season, and it was a 21-point game in the second game of the year in a blowout against Indiana. Like, I think it's becoming more and more clear over these last couple of years that Mikal Bridges is more of a 14 to 18 point per game guy as opposed to a 20 to 25 point per game guy, which we thought maybe he was developing into during that first half season in Brooklyn. And it's just not the case. You also look at, I mentioned the free throw shooting. The guy's only taken 6 3, or I'm trying to count him up on the fly here. 8 free throws on the year, 8 free throws in over 38 minutes per game, 9 games into the season. Like, he was taking over 4 free throws per game over the last 2 years. He's just not getting to the line whatsoever. So, part of that is Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, handling so much of the offense. He was basically the number 1 option in Brooklyn. I get all that, but it's not looking promising so far. I mean, he looks much more like a role player than some sort of third star for the New York Knicks. Meanwhile, Norman Powell, man, all this guy does is score. I mean, he's averaging 26 points per game, 11 games into the year, 31 for him last night. You do have to keep in mind that it really is just points. He doesn't rebound a ton. He doesn't give you many assists, but he is over a steal per game. The percentages are really good. He's shooting 53% from the field, 51% from 3. That will regress at some point. He's not going to be a top 20 player all year, but the Clippers absolutely need him to score. I mean, he is their best pure scorer outside of James Harden. So I would happily prefer Norm Powell here.
Yeah, 13th in the league in points per game, sandwiched between Damian Lillard and Kyrie Irving. Not bad company.
He's been so good.
There.
Yeah.
This is a fun one from Christian. My teams are being destroyed by injuries. Those damn injuries. Thoughts on trading away KD and Chet in a package deal for a top 5 player like the Joker? I think I'd sign off on that.
Oh yeah, I would do that.
Especially given all this time that Chet's going to miss. I mean, that's
yeah,
you would be avoiding quite the disaster by being able to pull that off. I don't think you can, by the way.
no, yeah. I mean, hopefully the Jokic manager is not listening to this because he should not make that deal. But if this is available to you, you should absolutely do this 100%. I know it feels like a lot to package two top 15, top 20 guys in KD and Chet, but Chet Holmgren is I don't think he's going to play until after the All-Star break. I mean, you're kind of taking a zero on him for 70% of the rest of the season. If you can make this deal, you should absolutely do it.
An unoriginal guy with an original question. Who to drop in a 9-cat 10-team? Zach Edey, Brook Lopez, and should I drop Klay for Andrew Wiggins? So it looks like two separate questions here. Edey or Lopez, Klay or Wiggins?
Yeah, interesting question there. I'm trying to give you a better read on the big men first. I mean, Lopez has still been the better player in 9-cat so far this year. Part of that is due to Edey just getting off to the really slow start. I mean, he's been significantly better over these last couple of weeks. I still think, though, Lopez is going to give you more blocks upside. So, with this being a 9-category league, I would say it totally depends on how much you need blocks versus how much you need rebounds or points, because Zach Edey is probably going to give you an advantage there. I mean, Lopez has been horrendous on the offensive end. You're looking for reasons why Milwaukee's off to the start that they are. How about Brook Lopez shooting 27% from three and 39% from the field, but he is still giving you over 2 blocks per game. If you're kind of looking for the rest of season upside, where could this go? I would go Edey. But if you need those blocks, if that's a category that you need to contend in, then I would still stick with Lopez. And then should you drop Klay for Andrew Wiggins? Yeah, the Wiggins thing, I mean, I don't like either of these guys necessarily for fantasy. Again, depends on what you need.
Does this go back to what you need? Because if you need the threes from Klay, then that's 100%. Sort of the answer.
100%. And, Wiggins is not that much better of an all-around player either. It's like, he gives you a little bit more.
I feel like he never gives you enough in any one particular area. No. He just kind of takes up space.
Yeah. I mean, it's both of these guys are kind of like you want to catch them on the right week. They rank essentially the same on the year. I guess for me, I put more value on Klay Thompson's 3-point volume. And I know he's in a bit of a slump right now. There are going to be weeks where he goes like 3 for 20 from 3. There are also weeks where he goes 12 for 20. And, those are the times you're happy that he's in your lineup. So again, in a category league, I still value the 3-point volume of Klay Thompson over the slightly better all around contributions from Wiggins.
A lot of questions coming in about Norman Powell. This one, Norm for Giddey in a 12-team 9-cat.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. In 9-cat, Giddey obviously is giving you a lot more in terms of rebounds and assists. So as always in a category league, it depends how much you need those. But I think the scoring and the threes from Norman Powell to me outweigh that. Josh Giddey in a 9-cat league, he's turning it over almost 3 times per game. You're getting lower turnovers out of Norman Powell. I mean, our system, which rates players, on a per game basis or, a total value basis, has Norman Powell significantly higher than Josh Giddey in terms of value so far this season. And, so much of that is derived from the 3-point shooting and just the overall points, and you always think, you can find points anywhere. You can't necessarily find 26 points per game on super efficient scoring anywhere on the waiver wire. So I would, if you could swap Giddey for Norman Powell, I know you're buying high on Powell. I get that. But I would do it. And, Norman Powell is also a significantly better free throw shooter. So partially depends how much you care about that category.
Some guys that have been surprisingly productive to this point in the season: Bub Carrington, Kyshawn George, and Brandon Boston Jr. Rest of season for those guys. Boston's been crushing it. Yeah. I don't know if I buy into the other two rest of season, but you just don't know with the Pelicans with all the injuries that they have.
Right.
Has this guy worked himself into the rotation legitimately, or is it all going to disappear? That's a tough question.
Yeah, if you want like deep Brandon Boston discussion, go listen back to yesterday's episode. Alex and I talked about him quite a bit. I'm surprised that he's doing what he's doing. At the same time, this is another guy who is a big time recruit in high school. Didn't really have the year that we thought he would at Kentucky, and kind of came into the NBA with a lot less fanfare than it looked like he would a year prior. But the skill set has always been there. The intrigue has always been there. Guy who had 10 assists last night in a narrow loss to the Brooklyn Nets. He's averaging 17, 5, and 6 with over 1.5 steals per game in the last 4 games. But he's also playing like 40 minutes a game because the Pelicans are completely banged up. I think it's a really good sign that he stayed in the starting lineup with Trey Murphy back last night. But there is going to become a point when Jordan Hawkins is healthy, DeJounte Murray's healthy, Herb Jones is healthy, CJ McCollum is healthy, Zion Williamson is healthy, hopefully, where Brandon Boston is going to be marginalized. He's also on a 2-way deal as well. So that's something to consider as far as the amount of games that he's allowed to play before they have to convert that contract. So that, there might be kind of an artificial deadline on him, but I would say ride Brandon Boston as long as the Pelicans are this banged up, which will probably be for at least another week or two. Kyshawn George, we'll see, another guy who's clearly benefiting from all the injuries, and he moved back to the bench last night with Kyle Kuzma back in the mix. Saw a pretty significant downturn in minutes. He went from playing about 35 minutes per game with Kuzma out to about 25. So that one to me is more of a 1-to-1. Like when Kuzma's healthy, Kyshawn George, not really fantasy relevant.
Michael asks, Bam is a free agent in our league, which is not a full-blown question, but I would say just go ahead and pick him up. I know it's been a bad year so far, but that's right. Thumbs up.
Unless I don't know what kind of league you're in here. I know he hasn't played that well, but yes, he should not be on waivers anywhere.
Yeah, just wanted to throw that one out there. And we'll wrap with Admiral Nita. Are Alex Sarr, Dyson Daniels, and Bilal Coulibaly sell highs?
Yeah, really good question. Coulibaly, it's so tough. Like he's somebody that
it sounds like he wanted to say yes to that just because of the assist numbers taking a downturn. That's a big part of his game if Kuzma isn't out there.
Yeah, I mean, he's, he got off to a really good start shooting the ball. The free throw percentage has been a lot better. The field goal percentage, I mean, he's shooting 57% from the field. So you just wonder if there's some regression there. The assists, I don't really care about that much. It's more about the defensive production for Coulibaly. It's like, can he give you 2 combined steals plus blocks per game going forward? Maybe. I would consider selling high. Obviously, it depends on who you can get. And it's tough because you probably got Coulibaly essentially for free at the end of your draft, and it's been a huge hit so far. But if you could swap that in for somebody who is a proven producer, somebody on a better team that might be more competitive, and you don't just worry about getting blown out every night, I would consider that. Dyson Daniels to me as a whole, though, because I really value the steals production. I mean, it's been ridiculous so far this season. He's at 3.3 steals per game now on the year. And this is not some fluke. I mean, he has 13 steals over the last 2 games, Brandon. 13 steals, 6 against Chicago, 7 against Detroit, had 4 against New York the game before. Now, it's not going to be that crazy, but this guy led the NBA in steal rate last year by a mile. Like, this is who he is. This is what Dyson Daniels does. And, he gives you this advantage in steals that, I don't know, Chet Holmgren or Victor Wembanyama or peak Rudy Gobert do in blocks, right? And, steals do tend to be a little bit flukier. There's not necessarily an archetype for steals like there is for shot blocking. But the advantage that he's given you right now is massive. And that's made him a top 30 player on the year in 9 category leagues. And again, Bogdanovic is going to miss 3 or 4 more weeks. The Hawks have injuries all over this roster. They brought in Dyson Daniels for a reason. They want to counter the terrible defense of Trae Young. I think he's going to see minutes no matter what, even when Bogdanovic is back. So in theory, is he a sell high? Yes, but I wouldn't want to sell him. If you're in a category league, I want those steals so badly.
We appreciate everybody lighting us up throughout the course of today's episode, and I encourage you to do that whenever you see us streaming for the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast presented by DraftKings Pick 6. I've been your host today, Brandon Kravitz. He's Nick Whalen. Have some fun with this NBA Cup. We'll chat soon.